again, Nikolai Lenin had the, again, all Sun, 4 planets in Taurus. They had a lot of a strong sense of Taurus in Russia at the time when they grew up. The elite had everything, and the average person had nothing. And it was the beginning of the socialist revolution. We should have things. It's not fair that it's all only by the rich and everybody else. So it started. These are the founders of the revolution. But I was surprised to see so much Taurus. I was expecting more Scorpio, but the Taurus put a more practical, down to earth side. Things should be shared. Things should be even. People shouldn't have to do without. Then it began to make sense. His chart is a seesaw with Uranus as the handle. That's the revolutionary. You got to change this. And here's Aurodindo's chart again. We had at the beginning with all the Leo. He was the revolutionary, but he became more the mystic and the teacher. His city, Orville, if you saw Close Encounters, there was a scene when they flipped to India and everyone was sitting in this cave around this sunken curve, and they were sitting around it, and that's one of the areas in Orville. They built a community where people came in and lived. It was a spiritual socialism. People could go and live there, and if they lived there for a year, then they could be integrated in the community. They'd never have to pay. They would have things to do within the community, and they wouldn't have to pay for rent or food. It was all taken care of. It's a very special thing. This is a chart of Richard Wilhelm, who was a Jesuit priest, and he ended up going to China, and he ran across the mystical teachings in China, as Jesuits are like to do, and he became evolved. He studied the I Ching for years, and he evolved the Wilhelm Bain's translation of the I Ching, working with a Chinese mystic, and bringing the I Ching back to the West. So he was very inspirational in my life. Again, another Taurus, but he has really a square chart. His chart is the only one I really have to so blatantly square. It has to be display, because it can't be seesaw. It's just out of order of the other planets being able to be the bucket, which is the one handle, and so it ends up falling into the seesaw. So this is Richard Wilhelm. There's Harry Houdini, Aries. He had a splash chart in all directions. So you just see some of the colors, like in the patterns. The color just comes up so different and vibrant. He was the Aries, and it's interesting that in his magical career, he could always stand up and he would let people hit him in the stomach. Big people, they'd hit him, the big boxers, people hit him in the stomach. He could always take it and never be hurt. But one day he opened his door and someone walked in, and instead of saying hello, just punched him in the stomach before he was ready, and that's how he died. Killed him. There's Carl Jung's chart. So the influence of Richard Wilhelm, the square display. Then there's Carl Jung, who technically doesn't fit into display. I used to call him a splay, but really it's a splash, because there's no squares. It's a little bit all around, but he has the 5-pointed star in it, very unique. And this is a Carl Jung chart with the Sun in Leo, Moon in Taurus. Wilhelm had the Sun Taurus. They influenced each other around. Wilhelm influenced Jung around the Ching, around the alchemy, and inspired him around alchemy and the secret teachings of all ages. And Aleister Crowley, a magician. He's a Libra, Moon in Pisces. And his chart's a seesaw chart. Edgar Cayce, he was the Pisces, the Aquarius moon, but he was a mystic. He'd go into these trances and he'd talk about the past and future and reincarnation. And his chart is all this very independent side, but the mystical Pisces was there. But he was a bucket with Uranus as the handle, conjunct his ascendant. So this was his eccentric individual, seeing things, breaking through things, and shaking up his identity, and still being able to, in the Sun and Seventh, being able to read how this person came from here, or was from there, how this would heal, how this. So he had special insights. This is the fun when you get into astrology. You want to look up all the people you know, look at their charts or whatever. So I looked at the charts, but seeing the charts and working with them, there was something in me that had to see them in color. I had to see the colors and had the feel of it before I knew this probably better, the theory and the philosophy. And it took me a number of years to really refine my interpretive skills, planets and signs and houses, to come at it. Now I've been teaching almost 45, 50 years. And by going over the foundations again and again and again, I'm very structured on my basic interpretations, but also have these other things going along with it. How we go for time. Okay, we're doing good. Okay, so this is Herman Hesse's chart. Cancer, Moon in Pisces, water imagination. He has the bucket chart with the Saturn handle, but there's just expressions in the color and how everybody has their own special mandala. Leon Trotsky, he was the Scorpio. He was the odd one out from the other ones in the Taurus, but he has a seesaw chart. Joseph Stalin, he's the Sag with a Virgo. Came in on it. So it was just people, I was just curious about it. It's like in coming to this way, I had to know what's going on. What's this chart? This chart? Oh, this was one of my earliest chart forms when I first was doing charts before I came to the more fancy ones we've been seeing. I just had a simple 12 signs of the Zodiac in, and I put the planets in, and I made the aspects. This was Alice Bailey's chart, another theosophist, all the planets on one side. The Gemini, Libra moon, all bright colors, no planets in the dark side of things. She had her own visions and ideas of things. Picasso, Scorpio, Sag moon. I mean, he used colors a lot, but he had the 4 planets in Taurus, wasn't a Scorpio, but his chart, it would be that way. It would be the seesaw. No, it ends up being the seesaw. So that's Pablo Picasso. Khalil Gibran, his chart. When you read him, he's like the salt of the earth. When you hear him, he says he's Capricorn, Sun, Mars, Mercury, Capricorn, Venus in Virgo, and 3 planets in Taurus. His moon was in Sag, but he had this big grand trine in Earth. When you hear this stuff, it's so earthy, it touches you. You hear it in a different way. He talks in a Capricorn way, not in a Leo way. His poetry, his book of poems. It's a book of poems written. He usually wrote in English, not in his native language, but he wrote a bunch of prose poems in his 20s that weren't translated till after he died. And when he died, his prose poems that were written in his own language was just the most beautiful. If you ever get a chance to see Khalil Gibran, everyone knows him for the prophet or the madman. The madman was what got him banned from Lebanon, and he had to escape and move to New York and lived in Greenwich Village. But his the mystical poems, his prose poems are really a great book if you can find them. Anyways, Benita Mussolini. Remember Edgar Allan Poe with the planets all in one area up in the dark side? Here's Benita Mussolini. Really, Leo Gemini, his own ideas of how everything should be. It's interesting because Trump's the Gemini with the Leo rising, but this is with all the planets on one side. He had a very independent, and Leo, the king is Leo, so he ruled by his ideas, and he was fanatical dictator. Everything above the horizon, all on one side. He could see what he wanted, that he was there. He couldn't see what anyone else wanted. They didn't have the social sense. Mark Edwin Jones, one of my favorite astrologers, but he is of the era like Carl Jung, Daniel Jarvis, way associated to him. But they were into the humanistic or mystical sides. He got into Sabian astrology and the mysticism behind astrology. And They would write words. They're from before TV. You know, they're from before this area, before even radios were in the home, really. So at the turn of the century, writing mystical thinking, someone would write a sentence and they'd say one phrase, another phrase, they add them together to have this long sentence that by the time you've read it, it's taking you through a change of consciousness. But if they would use words in a sentence, like he would write, and if he used 10 words in a sentence, each word could mean 5 words, 5 meanings. He means all 5, and then he adds, so you read it once and you're sure you understand it. You read it again, you get a totally different idea of what he's saying, and his words had a power, but they're very, like 80-word sentences or long sentences. They were like young, it took time to study. A lot of people wouldn't have the patience for him, but he was one of the founders of the mystical astrology, which brought the mystical, the theosophical, and the psychological somewhat together, the Jungian together, and that was built up to be the humanistic side of astrology. But Mark Edward Jones is the one who started the pattern types. He did them in the houses and worked with the American house chart types of charts. If you studied from his Sabian school, if you took his astrology lessons, and you signed up for his astrology lessons, you would get about 10 mimeograph sheets every week. They would be sent to you every week for 20 years. And if you finished that, you could join his philosophical, mystical side, and you would get another 10 mimeographs, 8.5 by 14 long mimeograph sheets. I don't know if you remember the mimeograph machines, but you used to hand run them off, and they would be sent out 15 pages a week for 25 more years. So you could study from him and have something new to read and study for 45 years continuously. He really was an incredible person, and he was an astrologer and so much more. But his influence on astrology was very inspirational. But it would be up to, in the onslaught of the psychological and scientific astrology, he's kind of been sidelined to being harder to read and more difficult in his background. In the end, he'll come around as being one of the mystical visionaries of it. He wrote things in very special ways. Adolf Hitler, a whole bunch of planets, Sun in Taurus, bunch of planets in Taurus, Moon in Capricorn. His chart, seesaw this way, could be a seesaw this way, could be a seesaw this way. So his ends up being a splay chart.